Hey, it's Unique History Channel. Today we're going to be doing a reading from My Struggle by Vladimir ZHIRINOVSKY, and will be the final part, Part 7, The Fate of Russia is in Our Hands. Russia's future depends solely on Russians. Whether or not the state structure of our country work is up to you and me. We decide whether the roads are impassable, whether we live in triumph and prosperity or hunger and deprivation. We are by fate joined together in Russia that has struggled with enemies from the east, west, north, and south. Ours is a Russia that has never solved the problem of its roadways. The time has come to build a solid, concrete roads with dividing strips, lights, public telephones along the way, service stations, illuminated markers for distances, forks, and viaducts. Such 2- and 3-lane highways constructed for high-speed travel will speed you to St. Petersburg or Whiskey to Yalta without the need to ever make a turn. We can have highways in our motherland if we bring cosmic accomplishments down to earth, creating a pleasant life for all our people. The joy we felt when the consummate return to earth dampened as soon as we went out on the streets of our cities and beheld the godforsaken roads, rattling trams, and half-filled trolleys, along with these eternal lines at all the stores. We shouldn't send a man to space while the whole branches of our industry stagnate. We shouldn't manufacture stockpiles of weapons while failing to produce the simplest consumer goods. Why do we stand in line for socks, underwear, light bulbs, shavers, batteries, condoms, furnitures, automobiles, and enduring a constant waiting? We have never had shops filled with goods or service without waiting, never in no region or city, yet the French and Germans and all the Europeans take things for granted. We, too, have abundant and comfortable lives. We accept the fate of Russia lies entirely in our own hands. We must feel ourselves to be citizens. We must acquire a national consciousness that says, I am Russian. I want to live in a rich country where every person is respected, where no one will look in my files and find out my nationality or my class, or whether I'm a party member. No one will stick a hand in my personal file and make telephone calls about my performance and my opinions. My passport should contain my given name, surname, and date of birth. Nothing else me is a state's business, not my nationality, my religion, or my marital status. Indeed, the time will come when there is no longer be any passports in Russia. Resident permits, which are already disappearing, are necessary, however, to enable us to wrestle the horde of southerners making their exodus to Russia's European center, moving past the Urals like cockroaches. The 21st century will belong to us, the proud Russians. In the 5 years remaining in this country, we put an end to all the revolutions, perestroikas, Gorbastrойkas, Yeltsinizm, and Burbulism. Yegor Gardia, who served at various times as Deputy Prime Minister and Prime Minister, was an architect of the government's economic reform policy. Transformed and purified, we will enter the 21st century. At the moment, however, we find ourselves in the bathhouse in a difficult and painful and unpleasant cleansing of filth accumulated by the 20th century. But our country needs to clean away the infection and evil clinging to us since the beginning of the century, the nationalism, cosmopolitanism, the alien religions, the ideas, lifestyles imported from the West into Russia's heartland with the aim of destroying us from within. By becoming nationally aware of ourselves as Russians, first and foremost, we put an end to an outside influence and emerge stronger nation that stretches from La Mancha to Vladivostok, happily part of the common European home. The French version, Mitterrand version, won't do for us. We don't want to become an aberrated version of Europe. Let us live honorably and openly as Russians who speak and think in Russian, who don't exalt our nation above others, who don't scoff, who have no violent intentions, who don't squarely reject world domination. By the same token, let us declare that we don't wish any other state to exercise worldwide rule as a superpower. On this to say to the Americans, stop before it's too late. We say to Bill Clinton, don't repeat the mistakes of Napoleon and Hitler. Bill Clinton, you and I belong to the same generation. America, too, has begun its collapse. Torn apart by ethnic conflicts, America faces its own perestroika, its own decay and degradation, but we Russians won't gloat when states succeed, factories close down, food and medical supplies become short, and Americans begin leaving for Europe, Russia, Japan, South Africa, and Australia. We won't gloat when California joins with Mexico, a Cuban republic is established in Miami, or a black republic in Georgia, or when Russia takes back Alaska. We won't gloat when the United States of America becomes a commonwealth of new American states governed not by Washington, but by San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Texas. We must emulate you in asking for loans from international banks, or seeking to defer and paying them back. With your many problems, your huge domestic and foreign debt, you shouldn't spit in the well from which yourselves have been able to drink. The Russians hold no hostility towards Americans. We have never fought you outright. On the contrary, we shook hands on the Elbe in Germany after fighting together to conquer the 20th century's most terrible aggressor. Today we cannot afford to make a mistake. The Chinese stopped in time with the ideas of Mao, having failed to win over the world, leaving Mao's revolution at the border of China. The Chinese now make no claim to world domination. The Germans have had their fill of fighting. Sweden, after being defeated by the Russian army, has forgotten the meaning of war. You Americans remain the last nation to cause a fuss, throwing rapid reaction forces dictating your will on Iraq, Libya, and Serbia, leaving these nations in peace by ending your blockades. Stay out of the affairs of Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Australia. Deal with your own problems. Let's engage for once in regional cooperation and put an end to the Cold War. You don't have to show us what to do in the Baltics and Central Asia and the Dniester region and in the Caucasus. And we won't show you what to do in the South or question why you kidnapped legal president of Panama, Manuel Noriega, or why you landed troops in Grenada and eliminated the regime of Morris Bishop. A time will come when you will have to answer for these acts which amounted to barbarism, bald aggression, interference in the affairs of other peoples, violation of both international and national law. You say you demand weapons reduction, fine, let's reduce, but simultaneously, for we will not unilaterally disarm. We have agreed to remove our troops from Europe, but start moving out yours too. The Germans, for that matter, prefer Russian to American troops. And in many countries of the world, supports exist for eliminating your military bases. So listen, Americans. Let's end the world tension we might have both caused. Let's not blame and insult each other. Let's stop the fighting over who has more warheads, tanks, planes, submarines, agreeing instead on a balance of power, regional cooperation, and a division of the world into spheres of influence based on North-South relations. Ending all the East-West tensions will eliminate the danger of war. To accomplish this improvement in relations, you have to leave the Balkans and the Middle East, for which the world will give thanks. If you don't cool your heels, one day you'll find yourself on the defendant's side of a new Nuremberg. You'll be on the defendant's side of a new Nuremberg tribunal. We believe in the prudence of America, for we understand that it's a country representing the fusion of the world's nations. Indeed, we would like to believe that your intention is not to dominate other nations. Remember, your way of life was achieved by thievery carried out under the protection of state institutions. First, you pillaged Latin America and Africa. Second, you became rich through two world wars. And in the last 50 years, you've been stealing the most valuable commodity in the world, brainpower, as the best minds in the world have been migrating to your shores. Every scholar, for whatever reason, emigrates to your country, enriches you, and makes you stronger. Your riches, you should understand, don't represent the achievements of your native people. In fact, among those who created your wealth are many Russians and Russian Jews who immigrated from the USSR. Similarly, many Russians work in various American laboratories. Everything in America is accomplished was achieved with the labor of nations and nationalities. Forsake my brothers who live and work among you. We should therefore calm down and deal with your respective domestic problems and avoid fighting. America can focus on South Mexico and adjunct areas including the Caribbean, Russia, on Afghanistan, Iran, and Turkey. And of course, to avoid interference with this division, we have come to an agreement. China, with its interests in Asia, will no need to look to askance to Russia's actions in Afghanistan and Turkey and Iran. Japan will agree to exit Russia's exit of the Indian Ocean for some turns on the Kuril Ridge, or perhaps some other consideration that takes its interests into account. For these agreements, in which Russia will have the last word, we avoid inflicting a political Chernobyl on the world. In the end, Americans must agree with our formula for world development, in which we carry out the last bid for the South and establish Russia's new southern borders. This last bid will be historically akin to the time when Russia, by sending its troops south, saved the world from the Ottoman Empire, that then stretched across 3 continents, northern Africa, southern Europe, and Asia Minor, eventually collapsed under the strain of 3 wars with Russia. Without this collapse, all of Europe might have been Turkicized, for the Turks had seized Budapest and laid siege to Vienna, and would have soon entered Berlin, Paris, or La Mancha. Likewise, 7 centuries ago, we stopped the Mongols. If we had let them pass and reconciled ourselves their supremacy, what would have become of Europe? Several other times has Russia turned back threats from east, west, north, and thereby saving Europe. Because of Russia, was liberated. Europe was liberated from fascism, in war in which Russians suffered the greatest loss. Over and over again, Russian soldiers were dressed in uniforms of the Tsarist or Soviet army stopped the world's most horrible aggressors. Nor did we follow up our victories by enslaving other nations. Indeed, to this day, we have not received sufficient compensation from the aggressors who trampled on our country and our people, not from Germans, French, Japanese, Turks, or Poles. For playing the historical role of savior and liberator, Russia deserves the gratitude of the world, but we don't seek medals for these historical missions, which are a part of our natural development at the heart of our renewed ability to assist the peoples of the South to retain our real emancipation. Russia alone can provide the help necessary to bring peace to the Far and Middle East, to Asia Minor, and Central Asia. The 1975 Helsinki Agreement on the involvability of established borders is in itself wonderful, although it does not take into consideration the difficult, protracted, bloody warfare among various national groups, using rapid reaction forces under the aegis of the United States as well as the United Nations. Peacekeeping troops, outside its efforts to stop fighting, have met with little success. These conflicts spring from deep-seated religious differences and the fury of nationalist forces and individuals striving for power. To resolve the disputes and stop the military actions that have caused so much harm to innocent populations and combatants, we need to peacemaking influence authority. The United States, representing American interests, lacks such authority, employing it as a forceful, illegal, sometimes criminal tactics such as Bush's farewell bombing of Iraq that allegedly targeted only military installations. Casualties of this fact, conducted with the well-known accuracy of the American fighting aces, included not only peace-loving population but also foreign journalists, with a bomb blown up one of Baghdad's most fashionable hotels. To this cruel raid, Iraq restrained response and was to create a mosaic of George Bush on the floor with the spacious lobby of the rebuilt hotel, with the former president's face will be trampled on by all who enter it. But can we call a country civilized that stoops to bombing the capital of a foreign country because of a fabricated, unstable charge that Iraq, particularly an assassination attempt of former president during his visit to Kuwait? The criminal we all know is drawn to the scene and the crime as Bush was drawn to Kuwait. And even though he was never actually attacked there, the United States still carries out brutal raid on Baghdad, killing innocent victims. Can you imagine if the United States attacked Kiev because it got in wind of an attempt that might have made life of Richard Nixon during a visit to the capital of Ukraine? The most effective way, perhaps only way, to prevent bloody conflicts in the South and the Middle East is to create cordon sanitaire separating the unrecognizable belligerents. To make this partition a reality is Russia's duty. We look at a map and we see that it's possible to use a corridor to cut off aggressive Iran, a country prepared to initiate new conflicts as well as enter existing other ones. Afghanistan, which failed to find peace after the Soviet withdrawal and is now showing the inclination towards military interference in Tajikistan's internal affairs, can be similarly isolated. Military occupation of Afghanistan is ineffective, and our experience has proven that fact. Only isolation of this war-torn country will prod its leaders into seriously working towards peaceful solutions. Russia already has enough lands, and creating such a corridor is not an attempt to add foreign soil to its vast holdings, but is instead purely a peacekeeping act. Moreover, the corridor can be carefully, peacefully, perhaps by offering affected countries generous economic compensation, favorable trade conditions, or the right long-term leases of border territories on mutually beneficial terms. The corridor will be narrow, with military settlements serving as strong points running down to the water's edge. In the distance will be the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, washing the shores of India, our eternal friend, and Iraq, our faithful partner in the Arab world. All the inhabitants of the new geopolitical zone will be within Russia's new borders will be calmed by the warm breath of the Indian Ocean. The Russian flag won't threaten any nation, and the Russian Navy in the Indian Ocean will make friendly visits to the port of India, the Persian Gulf, and Eastern Africa. We'll be friends with everyone, especially South Africa, to which we are joined by special economic and geopolitical and cultural interests. We won't set off for Western Africa, in which Western Europeans have interests, nor will interests infringe upon a conflict over the interests of Northern American states and Latin America. The world will achieve the order it has long craved and needed without swastikas, red stars, the Gestapo, or the KGB. We'll relax and breathe easier regardless of the color of our skin or the language we speak, though our arguments will be in Russian and English. With this quarter in place, we will finally understand one another. Every family will have the kind of home it wants, be it in a big or small town, on the slope of a mountain, in a village, in the tropics or in the woods. The home will contain 1 wife, 3 wives, or none at all, along with children, or 10 children, is your choice. You can have cows, sheep, even scientific equipment, depending on your preference. Every family will live according to its own laws, while at the same time observing the laws of its neighbors. This law will be universal, formulated to apply alike to everyone. Thou shalt not kill, steal, or lie, and it must be obeyed that if we are able to enjoy equal opportunities in life, there will be no dominant ideology, no one making bid for power, or no state attempting to impose its own over one world order. Instead, everyone will be living peacefully without intimidation by the Russian Ivan, American Uncle Sam, or the black man. Hunger out to disappear, mankind will be stricken by fewer illnesses. All of this will be possible when Russia acquires its national consciousness, not at the expense of interethnic peace. Not for the purpose of rising up Russians and putting down other nations. Instead, this consciousness will rise up the entire Eurasian continent from Brest, Kabul, and Yamalta, and Istanbul. Latvia will be a part of Russia. Within Russia, there will also be a small Lithuanian state. Members of Riga who desire small communities shall have a modest-sized Ukrainian republic. All of these things will come to pass if Russia heads south and stops at the banks of the Indian Ocean. The new borders established will be in the interests of Finns, Lithuanians, Estonians, and the members of the Riga. It will be also in the interests of Japanese, Hindus, Arabs, and Europeans. It will provide liberation from entrapment by Israel, America liberated from its delusions of grandeur, from the need to forcefully maintain its authority as the sole superpower will finally achieve tranquility. Having adopted its reliable formula, everybody will rest easier and the world can breathe a sigh of relief. The world is vast, its people are varied and different. No policy implemented will make everyone happy, not within a single family, much less in the world. Family, 2 children, someone will always be unhappy, and all the more if we added grandmother and grandfather. Yes, it is impossible to create a world without conflict. There will always be some sort of dispute or squabble. Likewise, it is impossible to rid mankind of disease. We will always come down with some kind of cold, whether it's flu, tonsillitis, or acute respiratory illness. But we can free ourselves from the fatal consequences of cancer, a world war in which molecular, neutron, chemical, bacterial weapons are employed. Yet, conflict between men and women will remain unavoidable. We will never be able to make everyone happy, nor can we create a situation in which every woman and man will get married and have only healthy children. It will never happen. Every young couple wants to have children in their own home and desirable employment. Frankly, these hopes are not possible. Sometimes there's no place to live, relatives fall ill, family breaks up, there's conflict, the boss, the mother-in-law, the father-in-law. There will always be so among families and nations. In matters of geopolitics, it is similarly impossible to please everyone from an ideal solution. I know, for example, that from Kabul, Tehran, and Ankara, many protests will resound. But do they think that in Ankara we accept their long-standing plan for a Turkish state? Why General Turker, founder of the Nationalist Party, was imprisoned by the Turks? He was sent to prison because the idea of Tehran, the great Turkish state from Istanbul to the Atalay Mountains, such nationalistic pan-Turkic ideas became dominant periodically, have always enjoyed their place among scholars, students, and government officials in Turkish society. Similarly, Tehran seeks to spread its Islamic revolution around its propriety in an effort to meet with partial success in Afghanistan might be extended to Azerbaijan and the future to Turkey. And what are these pan-Islamic ideas? Do they really serve to improve the world order? On the contrary, don't they represent a threat to all mankind? Isn't the internal warfare raging in Kabul also a threat to peace? And what about the long-standing conflict between Pakistan and India? Surely must put an end to all this disorder. Satisfaction with our idea exists now, has existed in the past, and will exist in the future. Dissatisfaction with the established order is to be found everywhere, both in particular families as well as family nations. However, people must consent and reconcile themselves to the plan, sake the measures, just as Russian communists must accept the fact that the Stalinist, Brezhnevist model of communism is unacceptable to most Russians. Communism shouldn't be forced onto labor and way of life. To attempt to do so amounts to fascism, and we all know how fascism ended. Russia's move to the south is a defensive measure and made in response to a threat from Afghanistan, which is already taking Tajikistan from Tehran, which is preparing a pan-Islamic seizure of vast territories from Ankara, whose pan-Turkism ambition threatens all of Europe. The large Muslim, Turkic, and Farsi populations present a convenient entrapment for Afghanistan, Iran, and Turkey to create Greater Afghanistan, Greater Iran, and Greater Turkey in the north. Turkey dreams about the Caucasus, about Azerbaijan and Georgia, about becoming a country of 4 seas, the Black Sea, Mediterranean, and the Caspian. The Sea of Marmara, even the Aegean. It isn't the history's intent. Worthy Turkish people enjoying the shores of 6 seas, the center of the world, while Russians perish? No, this is impossible ambition. The Turks should remember they came to Asia Minor barbarically and looted Constantinople, slaughtered and subdued the inhabitants of Asia Minor. They should remember the fact that their murder of 1.5 million Armenians during the 3 nights of April 1915. Millions of Kurds pronouncedly go under the Turkish yoke, unable to enjoy the Kurdish state and Turkish territory, Asia Minor, Syria, northern Iran, and the Caucasus. 28 million have always lived without the right of serf. Self-determination only Russia can grant them this fundamental right. Today, the aggressor and the victim should occupy different sides of the scale. We must finally understand who brought civilization to the world, explored space, who seized foreign lands, robbed others, burning down churches, or turning them into mosques. What culture of the Turks brought to Asia Minor? To this day, Western tourists who travel on Turkey are still shown remains of the Byzantine culture. There is, in fact, no Turkish culture, for culture does not exist on the back of a horse or in a drawn sabir. Base of the new Turkish army, the Janissaries, consists of young Slavic boys, captured and raised in the Turkish and Muslim spirit and turned into Turkish soldiers. It is terrible when Slavic boys fighting under Turkish flags are used to kill Slavic people. Who will answer for this crime? Who will pay the outrages committed on the Byzantine and Slavic peoples? No Nuremberg tribunal was ever convened to investigate the genocide against the Armenian people committed by Turks. What is the difference between the Turks and the Germans? Hitler's fascist regime of 7 to 80 million Germans killed 15 million people. The Turkish nation, numbering 1.7 million, exterminated 1.5 million Armenians and 7% of the population. The Turks have visited as much evil upon mankind as the Germans. For their crimes, however, the Germans, along with their party and ideology, were tried and placed under international guardianship, whose troops to this day remain stationed in Germany. But no one has yet to punish the Turks, making it seem as exterminating Armenians, members of a small nation, is permissible but not deferred to British or Russians. Double standards is all nonsense. All peoples are equal and no one should be allowed to get away with genocide. Even now, while Europe remains silent, Georgia is destroying Abkhazians and Ossetians, their tanks flattening, subpoenaing them, and their troops dismembering the corpses of Abkhazians. The Abkhazians, a small nation who wants to live freely on their own land, are being shut to this right and consent mount genocide, racism, fascism, who will stop the slaughter. For the matter, the clash between Azerbaijanis and Armenians, and with the Azerbaijanis and other Turkic people finally exterminating the Armenians. The Azerbaijanis and the Turks, after all, are really one and the same. Just in 1915, the Turks slaughtered 1.5 million Armenians, and the Azerbaijanis have been slaughtering Armenians since February 1988. Attempt to create an Armenian state. Armenian being Christian interferes with the unification of 2 Turkic nations, and the Azerbaijanis and the Turks. Now the Kishan, an artificial formation, is nothing more than an Azerbaijani settlement on Armenian territory that provides a point of contact with Turkey. Yet Armenia, a country of Caspian, Black, and Mediterranean seas, has existed there forever, and all that's left of Armenia today is a small strip of land once called the Urartu, a great state with great culture. Beginning there with an Armenian church and Armenian literacy and language, civilization began to spread to the world. The Azerbaijanis were a collection of Persian tribes Turkicized by the Seljuk Turks. Today, the Azerbaijanis are a tribe dwelling on the shore of the Caspian Sea. Khazar isn't the name of a country, but the place occupied by certain people. No more austere nationality than Sokolnikov, a neighborhood in Moscow. In short, don't reproach the Russians. We don't aim to punish the Turkish, Iranian, or Afghan people. We seek its freedom to all live in the South. The region today is covered in blood. Islamic Revolutionary Guards eliminated all dissidents in Iran. They fought a pointless war with Iraq for 10 years. Kurdish efforts to gain freedom have been suppressed for decades. Turkish troops bombed peaceful Kurds, flattened Kurdish communities with tanks and attack them with chemical weapons. Numbering 20 million, the Kurds would, by the European standards, make up a large state. Yet Europe has remained silent to preserve its relations with Ankara and Istanbul, and another example of European self-deception. What did the Turks do to Mustafa Supi with the communists? They lured them into a boat, took out on the Black Sea, murdered them, and threw their bodies in the water. That's not democracy, it's barbarism and savagery. Given this history, wouldn't we Russians be right in defending Armenians, not just as fellow Christians, but as people who have over centuries been wiped out, south, east, and west? Wouldn't we be right in giving Uzbeks, Tajiks, Pashtuns, and Daris a chance to live freely and safely in the land stretching from Tashniknet to Kabul to from Kandlar and the shore of the Indian Ocean? And won't these people be grateful for us? Won't Southern Azerbaijan be grateful for the choice to join with Northern Azerbaijan, making Azerbaijanis into a single nation? The 16 million of them who live in northern Iran are forbidden to speak their own tongue and call themselves Azerbaijanis. All these people, from the Blackfellows and the Arabs in the south, then a part of Iran to Persians, Turks, will be grateful to Russia. Today, Turks live in a besieged fortress on the island of Cyprus. Never a Turkish island, Cyprus should be a free republic or a Greek possession without occupation by Turkish troops. How many Greeks have been wiped out? How many Greek women raped? The Dardanelles, moreover, have always belonged to Greece, never to the Turks, just as Thrace is the territory belonging to Bulgaria and Greece, so why do the Turks continue to occupy these places as conquerors? When we make the transition to regional cooperation in the last bid for the South, we can settle all these ancient disputes, put everything in its proper place without labeling nations either as aggressors or conquerors. The Turks will find their niche by returning to Taxis, Ashgabat, Kapravika, and the Aral Sea, the lands they originally set out in better lands. Instead of conquering and destroying the inhabitants and the cultures of foreign countries, they can focus on improving their land in which they were born and had lived. Indeed, the Turks have not created anything in Asia Minor to replace what they found and sometimes destroyed. The citadel, the cradle of civilization in Asia Minor, Greece, Rome, Mesopotamia, Egypt, growing out of centuries of servitude, were all brought under Turkish rule through seizure by force. It was Russia alone that liberated northern Africa and southern Europe from the Ottoman domination, for which action to this day millions of people are grateful. Isn't Russia then capable and obligated by history to carry out a final gesture to make another dash, a modest one for the South? We could construct a broad gauge railroad over the trains will travel all day, safely back and forth from Moscow to Delhi, Kabul, Tehran, Baghdad, Ankara, and to the coastline of the Indian Ocean. In the last bid for the South, we will avoid the outbreak of war and the threat of annihilation to innocent peoples, bringing freedom as well as reliable conditions under which development can occur. The Germans, who have no idea what to do with the 4 million Turks in their country, to say nothing of the expatriate Gypsies, Romanians, Czechs, and Russians, this influx of foreigners, Germany is facing a crisis with fascist parties once again making their appearance. The last bid for itself will stop the influx of Russians into Germany while encouraging the Turks of their homeland. Russia as well stands to accept some Turkish workers, some of whom already work in Moscow. Our plan for the South is summary, as well as thought out, grounded geopolitical, national, and ideological logic. Okay, the end.